Dear God, as we begin anew, give us a fresh heart and fresh eyes too. Amen. Signs in the sun, moon, and stars. Trouble among nations, the heavens shaken, everywhere people fainting in terror. With those 2,000-year-old lines from the Gospel of Luke searing our eardrums, I want to segue to an example of a contemporary prophecy. But before that, let me note that on this first Sunday of Advent, every year, this or a similar earth-shattering gospel text always shows up in the lectionary. And each time it does, I Google around to find, a current prediction of the end of the world. Because, there's always someone expecting cataclysm, and here's the latest one I could find. A religious sect that's been around since 1980 called the Messiah Foundation International maintains that the world is passing through its twilight phase. Its founder, Riaz Ahmed Gohar Shahai, or Shahi, I'm not sure, claimed to have met with Jesus Christ on May 29th, 1997 in Taos, New Mexico. Evidence that Jesus loves green chilies, I think. I'm not sure. Forgive me. Details of their meeting are scanty, but members of the sect believe that the world is supposed to end in 2026, which is just around the corner, when, according to their prophet, a comet will collide with Earth. But before this happens, the image of Shahi or Shahai is supposed to become visible on the face of the moon to provide comfort to his followers. There it is, a sign in the moon. Well, every prediction of the end of the world thus far has been wrong. Not 98% of them, no, 100 solid percent. A perfect record of failure and sometimes fraud. And yet, in our tradition, we have this story where Jesus says, be on your guard, be alert at all times. You have something to wait for. Stay sharp. Watch. What are we to make of this business? I mean, look, Christmas is close at hand, and it comes with this promise of something soft and new, a warm, cuddly baby. But biblical tradition tells us that the message that the disciples got from Jesus is a bit different. They understood that the world as they knew it was coming to a close, that something big was going to happen. For good or ill, they had no idea. They did sense, however, that it was something that would make the present and future unrecognizable to them. And Advent tradition says that we are supposed to wait with a kind of uneasy anticipation. Why? Well, as I said, every prediction of the end has been flat wrong, if not laughably wrong. And yet there are also people of faith about us who have such a nuanced sense of the touch of holy that they sense it stealing upon us unawares. But so few of us are mystics, right? Few of us can recognize the hand of God, the holy, whatever it is, spiritual, when it creeps silently upon us like the medieval mystics were able to understand it. I mean, look, we tend to use templates from the past to make sense of everything in the present. And in the case of the things of God, they don't often work. Let me tell you why. You know how when you're waiting for something in particular, your brain has a way of phasing everything else out. If you're waiting for a certain car to pull into your driveway, say, it's midnight and your 17-year-old daughter isn't home yet, are you going to pay a whole lot of attention to the sound of an airplane overhead or the hum of your refrigerator cutting out? No. Your ears, your whole being is tuned to one frequency alone, namely the hum of that old Honda Accord you let her drive. If someone talks to you while you're waiting, you may pretend to be listening, but only until you hear that car coming into the driveway. Scientists have, in fact, devised a game that proves how very hard it is for us to notice one thing when we are expecting something else. Here's how that goes. They sit you down at a table in front of what looks to be an ordinary deck of cards, and they flash 6 of them at you, asking you to identify them as fast as you can. 9 of diamonds, 3 of hearts, jack of clubs. What was that 4th one? Then they repeat the exercise, slowing it down a little so you can get the ones you missed the first time, except it's still a problem. And the 3rd time, they throw them to you so slowly that you think you must be an idiot because there is still one card you cannot identify. You think you know what it is, but you're not sure, and it's not until the cards are all laid face up on the table right in front of you that you see what the problem is. The mystery card is a 6 of spades, only it's not a black spade, it's a red one. The deck's been fixed. That card's been tampered with, big time. You could not see a red spade because you know that all spades are supposed to be black. It's in you. You've got that figured out. So how does that relate to Jesus and those signs and the sun and the moon? Well, long ago, for a very short time when I was in college, I had a girlfriend who insisted I try out her church. It was a very small and very conservative, and the people there who were so very, very welcoming were totally obsessed with the notion that Jesus would be back very soon. Jesus for them, was packed and already on his way to earth. He'd be easy to spot, dressed all in white, riding a white horse with wings spread, dropping out of the clouds. He was expected to touch down on the White House lawn, maybe, or the rink, the ice rink at Rockefeller Center. Whole thing was kind of scripted and totally linked to addressing all the troubles and enemies of the present moment. Well, I was as good a guest as I could be, but I wondered quietly, what if he might come back as a Guatemalan of Mayan extraction, riding a burro, or maybe a Tibetan monk on a yak? What if he'd come out of the housing projects of Richmond, California, on a broken down bicycle, wearing dreadlocks down his long back? Stranger things have happened, Is not this the carpenter, the son of Mary? Some asked when he first came back to Nazareth, his hometown, as now a well-known and well-traveled preacher. I mean, his friends and his family didn't even recognize him. What kind of Messiah would have first been a common laborer? Red spades have always been hard to see. Look at the fig tree, says Jesus. He's talking to his disciples who are obsessed with sun, moon, and stars. Never mind red spades. If we want to learn what God is up to, Jesus seems to intimate that we can begin by attending to the world right around us first, because there are parables happening on every street corner and clues to the arrival of the reign of God in every square foot of earth, but who among us is looking for them or can see them? This is what Jesus is getting at when he tells his friends to look at a fig tree. They may not have actually looked at one for a very long time. They may have been focused on abstract things like judgment, salvation. They may have been filled with fear, expecting dramatic things like earthquakes and plagues and World War III. This is the stuff that itinerant preachers were always talking about and still are. I've always said to people that if the message of a preacher is clearly meant to scare you, then, well, be careful. I don't think that fear is God's usual tool to get people's attention. Autocrats love it. They find it very effective, scaring people. But God, fear is disabling. It is not enabling. And what we need is not to stand down frightfully, but to stand up, to mount up. We need courage to live in times like these. And maybe by directing the disciples' attention to a common fig tree and away from their fears, Jesus was trying to get his people to pay attention, not to scary things they have no control over, but common seasonal things that they might exactly get energized by. Even a fig tree. Maybe, says Jesus, God is speaking to us in the most common, ordinary things on the face of the earth. It was Abraham Joshua Heschel, a modern mystic, who is remembered to have said, "Our goal should be to live life in radical amazement. Get up in the morning and look at the world in a way that takes nothing for granted," he said. Everything is phenomenal. Everything is incredible. Never treat life casually. To be spiritual is to be amazed. Some years ago, I was visiting Santa Fe. Yeah, New Mexico is appearing all over in this sermon. Took my family there. We went to the Georgia O'Keeffe Museum there in the downtown. Hope you've been there. It's amazing. I had to park a couple of blocks away, and as I was walking toward the museum, I saw this woman coming toward me all alone, and I thought, I know that lady. I remember thinking I might have gone to high school with her. And then just before I was moved to address her familiarly, I realized all at once that she was Ally McGraw, the actress. Well, I was pretty impressed with my sighting, but nobody else I ran into was interested at all. And it faded pretty quickly inside that museum, surrounded by those huge paintings of cow skulls and flowers. Can we have those up there? There we go. Who else has ever painted things more common than Georgia O'Keeffe? Her paintings are exactly like Jesus' injunction to take your eyes off things our popular culture is obsessed with and look instead at something as common as a fig tree. In fact, Georgia O'Keeffe is remembered to have once said, "No one sees a flower." Not really. To look at a flower, she said, takes time, like having a friend takes time. Think about that. Every day, at least once, we say, "I don't have time," or "I'm out of time." But the truth is that we all have time. I don't have any more or less than Mother Teresa or Georgia O'Keeffe, right? There's just today, right? I mean, there's just now. Time. Recently, a minister friend told me I had to see a web page that is called, get this, the death clock. I opened it up, and right away it asked me what my birth date was, whether I was a smoker or not, my rate of alcohol consumption, and my BMI, body mass index, right? And then in a moment it opened my personal death clock page, complete with a tombstone and the initials RIP. It said that my personal day of death was going to be Sunday, March 5th, 2045. Then it said I had 648,028,799 seconds to live. Have a nice life. And the seconds and milliseconds, were just ticking away, just spinning. And then it asked me if I wanted to use that as my personal screensaver, so that every time I opened or closed my computer, I could see just how many seconds I had left to live. No, I thought, but thanks for sharing. Right? I could see that a lot of people had sent email to the webmaster of this site accusing him of being grossly morbid. But his point, he said in his own defense, is that when you see that your time on earth is limited, the quality of your life just might begin to increase. You might not only be prompted to live better, you might begin to savor your moments. You might begin to see a fig tree. Time is passing. Whether it passes quickly or slowly is what we have. The question is, how do we use it? In Advent terms, the question is more precisely, how shall we wait? Will we be casual about our everyday, or will we keep watch? Will we stay awake? Will we just see all the things we've seen before, or will we try to have fresh eyes that might bring us new visions of all that familiar stuff that need not be familiar at all? Jesus' answer about looking at this fig tree is, as I have said, an invitation to pay attention not only to what may happen in the future, but also to what is happening right now in front of us. It's a clue that God might be reaching out to us through things we wouldn't have thought of as religious at all. Scholars tell us that texts like this one in Luke are apocalyptic. That means revelation. It comes from the word revelation. Barbara Brown Taylor, who gave me the idea for this sermon, says that revelation, quote, is the moment when you are looking at something you've looked at half your life and suddenly you see it for the first time. Whether it's the sun coming up through the trees like an iridescent peach, or the sorrow in your neighbor's eyes, or your own face looking back at you in the morning mirror. Revelation is the moment when you can see through, see into, see beyond what is going on to what is really going on. It's not about men on horses in the sky. And you can see these things not because you are some kind of genius, but because God decided to let you, and you happen to be paying attention to that thing at that moment. Be on your guard, says Jesus. Be alert at all times. Not so you will know when to grab your crash helmet and head for the basement, but so you will know when the reign of God is coming near to you. So you will not miss God when God comes. Stand up. Raise your heads, he says. There are all kinds of ways to wait. Even when you are waiting for something that's terrible. I'm impressed with the similar reaction so many have had about the last election. Many, if not most, I've talked to have gathered themselves now, these 3 weeks along, and have vowed to live one day at a time and to choose joy as many of those days going forward as possible. They have vowed to not let the agenda of Project 2025 take all the air out of the room. They have decided to keep breathing and live and love with as much gusto as ever. Can you relate? I know of someone who was 8 years old when London was bombed nightly in 1940. She lived in the heart of town with her grandparents, her cousin Bettine, and a big English sheepdog named fittingly Blitz. Blitz went with the family to their sandbag garage when the air raid sirens sounded. They shared the shelter with a Swedish couple who had a daughter about the same age as Bettine. And what Bettine remembers was what fun the two of them had. Nothing in life since has surpassed it, she said, for pure fun. We saw things in those sandbags no one else saw, she said. We hunted for gold in them, and we found it. Then we hid it again. Sometimes we found goblins and fairies. There was a whole world down there that the adults could not see. They sat up on their mattresses reading their books, and when we got too loud, they'd say, "Shh, we can't hear the bombs." Then we would listen too, and if the explosions were nearby, we would get scared. Only the Swedish girl taught us what to do. She said, lie on your back and cross your arms over your chest. She said, God will protect you. After the bombs stopped, we would howl with laughter. We would sneak outside and look up at the sky, the beautiful sky, where all the ugliness had come from, until some air raid warden came along with his flashlight and shooed us back inside. Then our dog Blitz would get in bed with us, and grandmother would tell us such wonderful stories. I tell you, we had an awfully good time. There are all kinds of ways to wait, apparently, even in the worst of times. There is the tense, dread-filled waiting of those to whom a spade is always and only a spade. There's even a kind of compulsive waiting in which one collects signs of the end like souvenir spoons. Get the whole set and boof, the rapture will come. The problem with all these, as far as I can tell, is that they assume God operates by the same rules we humans do and will never slip in a wild card in the deck. Only, what if God hands us all wild cards? The only way to wait for a God like that is to look not at social media, not at the television, but to be on guard, to be alert at all times so that we do not miss the revelations we're being offered every day of our lives right where we live. We need to be alert for street corner parables and apocalyptic fig trees and gold in sandbags and children howling with laughter at bombs dropping from the sky, the beautiful, beautiful night sky. How shall we wait? With basic, everyday children's courage, as wide awake as we know how to be, as fully alive as we can be, not because we have to, not because we should, but because we can. Thanks to the one who our ancient tradition says has died, who has risen, and who comes, as our tradition says, again and again and again. Amen.